Hello friends, Jennifer Pearson here, Thistle Gypsy, with the continuation of my conversation with Eline Eugenie. And it has been a few days since I watched your replies, Eline, so this could be extra rambly or garbled. So for anybody who's stopping in and this is your first time stopping in on our conversation, we're talking quite a bit about energy work, chakras, Shakti / Kundalini energy, power animals. It's ranging. It has a lot to do with her kind of coaching me in terms of my own understanding and my own attempts to use these, I'll use the word modalities, to improve and kind of retain the level of health that I have managed to achieve at this point and improve it. So I really appreciated, Eline, how you were talking about what you do to kind of help the energy work on certain areas, or I almost think of soak into certain areas or treat certain areas or whatever. And kind of the words I ended up putting down on paper here was, and you had said something like, well, I'll just use my own words because that's how I processed it. I wrote down, the Shakti will focus wherever you are, as in wherever the way I was taking it is wherever your attention is. And so I was thinking in terms of sort of holding space for the Shakti in terms of what you're, or for where in the area that you're wanting it to have an impact on. And I was almost thinking, and so you're just sort of holding your attention there, and that's where the Shakti will then I'm using the word like migrate is coming to mind. And it was reminding me of acupressure release, or a lot of the massage, and I can't remember now what it's called. It's called something point, pressure point therapy or pressure point massage. And my sister will do this on me quite a bit. And essentially that's a lot of what I do when I lay down and I use tennis balls down on my hips. And so, you kind of hold that area, whatever you're using as pressure, you hold that area until it releases. And in this case, it's not a release necessarily, but, so it was interesting, and it was helpful in terms of my thinking about it. And so, again, my own wording as I put it down here is that you hold it there until you get to a threshold of integration or acceptance, and that takes time and duration. So it takes time, and that's part of the work that was being referred to, is that you have to stay there. So, and I put that down here, yeah. And you also had mentioned too that, of course, that part of the work is the integration or the adjustment that has to happen after the integration, or the integration after, the taking that energy up. And again, this, doesn't ever sound quite right, is taking the energy up into you, or allowing maybe the energy into you. As for, there was a brief concern about me from a variety of fronts because tornadoes in Alabama hit the news, and I actually didn't even know there were tornadoes in Alabama until the next day. And somebody from another state, somebody from my work actually, was said, "Were you impacted by that? Were you all right?" And it's like, oh, there were tornadoes. We had no tornado weather in my area, which is northeast Alabama. None. Not even, to my thinking, the threat of it. So I was quite surprised. I didn't know that in the southeastern part of the state they got hit very badly. And tornadoes are very, for anybody who doesn't know, who doesn't have the incredible pleasure of living in tornado country, are generally very localized. They can travel and have an impact over a long way, but they're, and we do get tornadoes in this area, just not that particular time. We didn't get that. There was one that went by just a couple of miles from where I live one time, and just, God. Anyway, yeah, we're kind of in the heart of tornado country, but I'm not likely to get impacted unless it's, it comes right over my home, and thankfully that has yet to happen, and hopefully never will. Appreciated, Eline, your reassurance that I would be whole again, and I actually do feel whole again. I feel like that sacral chakra area is still processing things out, and I will share this sort of too much information thing with anybody who happens to watch this who has had a hysterectomy. I would be curious to know if you had this experience as well, anybody else out there. So, I don't recall ever having like little pimples or any sort of eruption of that kind in my lower belly area. I don't ever recall having that. When I had my hysterectomy afterwards in the suture area, my body was wanting to reject the sutures, and in one area it was rather infected. I spent a lot of time flushing one corner of that area with peroxide and flushing it out, and eventually went back to the surgeon, and he pulled some of the suture out. He said, well, it was almost all dissolved, but yes, there was an issue there where it was, what my body was doing was pushing it out. My body was pushing it out. Well, there's sutures all over in there as a result. Or, now I don't know about all over, but that was not all there was, and my body clearly was not happy with those sutures. Why? I don't. And they were dissolvable sutures. But I feel like my body is still little bit by bit, so I ended up having not acne or anything like that on my lower abdomen, but these little eruptions, pimples, that every now and then show up, and they used to be very regular, and they're now much less common, but it's like so my body is still, after years, is still processing whatever happened in there, but yes, I do feel whole, and I never had a doubt that I would eventually feel whole. I mean, I'm very, very far from the first person who has experienced that sort of thing. One of the the questions I had is, you brought up, how physical things can manifest, kind of like psychological things, as ancestor stuff. But I'm not so sure that's what's going on here, but I would question the difference between ancestor stuff and actual physical material heredity. Because once I ended up with this issue, with the fibroids, I knew of one aunt who had a hysterectomy. Well, then I learned that a bunch of my cousins, did all of my cousins have hysterectomies in the end? My female cousins, I think, except maybe for one on my father's side of the family, and it was the aunt on my father's side of the family that had hysterectomy. And on top of that, and these are people my age, so at the, I don't know when they had their hysterectomies. Certainly at the time my aunt had her hysterectomy, it could potentially have been a part of that time when it was generally believed that it was being used as a solution too often. But I think that's not the case with my cousins. And I learned that my mother's mother had actually had a hysterectomy as well. My mother was so young when it happened, she doesn't know why that was. So, yeah. So genetically, it seems to be all over the place. What else might have contributed to that issue? And I think with the hysterectomies with my cousins, it was fibroids. I don't know about my aunt. I didn't. Okay, so I have a note here. I think I'm going to let that one go. All right, I have a question for you, Eline. So you were locating these places along your spine that were cold. And I don't know if that's a quote, cold, or if it physically felt cold to you. And so my question is, was this just sort of out of the blue that this came to you, or are you able to kind of survey your body for these cold areas? So that's a question I have for you, curious about. So the Earth Star Chakra, that was so interesting what you had to say about that. I was aware of it. My Lyme doctor, well, he didn't bring up this. He brought up more what is, I think, is sensitivity to electromagnetic pulse. And I can't remember what that kind of sensitivity, electromagnetic something, sensitivity, maybe it's EMS, electromagnetic sensitivity or something. He brought that up as a possibility. Somewhere I learned about earthing. It was, there was a shaman. I thought I might actually remember his name there for a minute. Who has or had YouTube videos, and I checked out his website, and down at the bottom there was something about earthing. And this earthing, I have the book on it, and the book I think is just for this period of my life. I used to be somebody who could gobble up science books, but not so much anymore, and so it's a little bit too much grounded in the physics. But it is essentially supporting the idea kind of the Earth Star Chakra. not a chakra per se, but the importance of actually having physical, uninterrupted, without the layer of shoes and all of that, contact with the physical earth. And it has to do with ions, positive and negative ions, which then is like having acid versus alkaline, and how those things connect together chemically and in physics and all of that kind of stuff. In any case, and I do find that when I have an opportunity, and I do this sometimes as therapy, it's a little bit difficult for me here because it's so hot. During the summer, that doesn't work very well for me, but again, and then in the winter, I'm a weather ninny, and I'm a chicken, and I don't go out and sit in the cold. Ugh. And then my stupid yard is so wet, and we just had such a wet, continuously wet. I mean, we might get 2 dry days in a week. And I can hear the thunder is starting. We're about to get rained on again after a couple of days, if not, well, we did get some rain, but not heavy rain. In any case, I can't even get my lawn mowed, and it needs to be mowed at this point because the yard is so wet. So there's no way I could go out there and sit. I could stand, I suppose. It's not so cold right now at this moment that I couldn't go out there and stand, but spring is coming here in Alabama, so I'll have more opportunity to get back into that habit of doing some actual physical contact with the ground. So, and feet on the ground, butt on the ground, legs on the ground, whatever, getting actually on the ground. So I thought it was really interesting, the removing of garbage, as you said, from the Earth Star chakra, or that isn't what you said. This is how I've written it, removing garbage. And I did a little bit of that. It was really kind of interesting, so I tried this was kind of in connection with the whole rose and releasing, sort of a exercise. But before I did that, I did kind of I felt like I was sort of opening the trap door and just letting, and it was just sort of crud come down. And there was some, but not a lot. And then, I did the attempt to release anything that is not mine, that's in my space. And then, I found that as a lesson, because this is new to me, your self-sun, your personal sun, I have to maybe take a few minutes before I even start with the rose and everything to imagine that, to get in touch with that, to have that there. And then, so I kind of need to make my sensing of that quite a bit stronger. And then there were some things, and what it ended up feeling like was that sun, once I got it set, once I could sense it, was sort of pulling in, but it wasn't like big stuff. It was more like, in terms of bringing energy back to me, it was more like powdery stuff, just sort of coming in. So it's not like with the theta healing, or I think it was my sister said that her experience, I don't know if it was her experience or somebody else that shared in the group that she was a part of who were learning this, that it was just like a whoosh, like when the energy that had been out there came back, it was just a huge, I think they were supposed to be imagining it as a shower of some kind, and she had a deluge, or whomever, and that definitely was not my sense of things. So I'm continuing to explore, and I'll share some of my recent experiences here in a little bit. now I can't remember what you said. It says using white light for this. I think you had said bringing the white light down and then kind of having it push. That's what I'm thinking of now, is having it push the stuff out, push the crud. And I do feel like that's that part of it. Maybe not so much with the aura boundary and releasing what's mine and gathering back in, but this whole releasing of negative crud, I feel like that actually is a very important practice for me to start doing regularly. That's intuitive. I think that could be the case. That maybe the more I do that, the more will just sort of be broken up and released. Just sort of like my belly and the hysterectomy and whatever happened down there. Whatever it's trying to get rid of, is just pushing stuff slowly out. And I feel like I will just be, for quite some time, that will be part of what I need to be doing. And speaking of the crud, part of the reason, and I didn't think of it at the time, I don't know how these things are dealt with, but I did think of it at the time, actually, now that I think about it. So this is going back a good year or so ago, and so this is shifting now more into the shamanic, or really not shamanic, power animal. It's a power animal thing. Back when I had power animals kind of here, there, and everywhere. I don't know if I had read somewhere about and I can't remember what the word is, but it's part of multiple sclerosis. So it's the sclerosis part, and it's something that adheres to nerves, to your nerves, and I can't remember what it is, but then makes them less able to function, less resilient, less able to do their work in terms of firing and communicating. And that is something that happens, with, or can happen with Lyme disease as well. And so I did my thing that I was doing at that time, which was that I was like, okay, so who wants to help me with this, to break any of these concretations, whatever, this sclerosis, this, whatever I may have, because this was a time when, so it might have been more than a year ago, when I was feeling very weak. I was otherwise feeling relatively healthy, but I was feeling very weak. And that can indicate with the Lyme disease that the Lyme is impacting your nervous system somehow. So, so that's what I was just like, they say with cancer, they tell you to visualize something that's attacking or whatever. And I wasn't thinking that. I was just thinking, I was visualizing, and I visualized them kind of as trees, the ganglions, the trees that were encased, and asked, of the power animal world, who wants to come and help me, release these, skin them. There's Miss Boo there. And I got rhinos. So I ended up with a bunch of rhinos, just not one, but a bunch of rhinos. And so what I would see is these rhinos ramming these trees, and stuff would start to fall off of them. And and what was underneath was clear, like glass. So even though they could be rammed by these rhinos or whatever. And then, they just sort of went happily their way, crashing around, and which is appropriate, right? Because that's what they call them, a crash of rhinos. And, kind of for the branches and the fine parts, there was a flock of birds. And I also ended up, I think, asking some birds or for something to come in and kind of wash all that detritus, all that crud that had fallen from the trees, to wash that away. So, and this is, again, it is a shamanic kind of work. It's not something I expected to have an immediate response to, and I didn't have any like miraculous change. But over time, yes, and I would say that's not very much. Right now, if I'm feeling weak, it's because I need to develop my muscles again. So I need to do some muscle development. It's not a weakness that prevents you from doing anything with your muscles. So yeah, no, I don't know why I went off on that tangent. The crud. And so I feel like, and certainly so long as I do have and appear to have active Lyme bacteria in my system, then they are producing crud. They themselves are excreting crud into my system. So I feel like that needs to be a really important part of whatever it is I'm doing. Okay, so Eline pulled cards for me that were really curious. They were all court cards. And the two that were on my side, if I'm remembering this correctly, the two that were on my side were cups cards. And the two that were against me were wands. No, these were all on my side. It's the other ones. Okay, so everything that's on my side was all of the court cards. There were 2 cups and 2 wands. There was a Knight of Cups, a Knight of Wands, a King of Cups, and a Queen of Wands. That was so curious. But one of the things when I wrote down water and fire. And I thought, well, those two cancel each other out. So it was kind of a bizarre combination. Although the other thing that comes to mind with fire and water is hot water. So, I had talked about thinking about bringing hot water up, as that warming element as opposed to light or fire. And I don't think I've given that a good try yet, if I'm recalling correctly. Now, I did something the other day, last night, where a lot of times when I start, so this is sharing all of my errors so people can learn from my errors. I start from me, and I feel like I'm starting from this, and I'm trying to somehow pull energy, that I should be feeling this energy without making any contact downward. In other words, I'm just here, and I'm expecting to feel something underneath me, but I don't reach for anything underneath me. So when I do that release of crud down in there, I do feel like I'm making contact with that earth energy. And then it becomes easier to... It's storming out there now. I was able to feel sort of like I had a connection. I didn't feel like I could quite bring anything up at that point. But then last night what I did was I intentionally was reaching downward. down, 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 not just to the earth as in the physical layer that I could go walk out in my yard on, but down, 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 down to the core, down to that fiery, molten core. And this time, as you said, you know, the last time it was, you know, the volcano. This time, I put my hand, as absurd as that is, I put my hand over it. Like, there you are, and you're going to only come up as I bring you up. You're not going to come up in an uncontrolled manner. So this is me, my dog trainer self, reprimanding the energy of the earth. And so that's what I did. You know, in my mind's eye, I was bringing that, and only a small, like, column of that molten energy I brought up to the root chakra area. But I didn't let it be in contact with me. Instead, I brought water up against it and brought some of the water up into it. And, you know, so that was warm water. And I didn't really feel a warm sensation. And when I'm bringing stuff up these days, I feel like I don't get above the cradle of, like, maybe the sacral chakra area, or what I would call the cradle of my hips. You know, that it doesn't, nothing, the sand didn't want to go above it, you know, the water really wasn't going much into that. So, and I think that is a visualization that I will repeat. And I think what I ended up doing mostly was just thinking in terms of soothing or connecting the root chakra and just sort of connecting the root with the earth without trying to go any further than that, really. So there was the fire and water. But the court card aspect is really curious. I suppose knights are movement, and I am trying to get things to move here. And the king and queen do have to do with control or management. So, I mean, that does make some sense. Kind of in retrospect, more than at the moment that I saw them. Not on my side, the hermit. And I think the hermit aspect is partly just not having anybody around who gets it, you know, who is exploring this sort of thing. And, you know, so there's not even, you know, like a class I can go to that's nearby. You know, there's just nothing like that around here. So I think that is, it is not on my side. The star came up as being not on my side, and I think that Eline was thinking it might have to do with astrology. I'm not sure how else the star, because the star is such a positive card, would be not on my side. The only other association I would have with the star is maybe that the whole white light or bringing stuff down. And that has been my approach, and I've gotten some good results from that approach. But maybe it's saying that if I'm going to make a shift, I have to make the shift. You know, it's like, well, I can do that. I have evidence that I can do that. Maybe I need to develop this other polarity, so to speak, in order to really get things flowing. The Five of Wands, plunging ahead. Possibly, or just general impatience, maybe, with the process, as Eline described, needing to really just sort of sit there and hold. I think of it as holding space or holding attention for things to start to transpire. I maybe want it to happen too fast. The King of Swords, yeah, just mental preoccupation, being too much in my head. That one made actually the most sense to me. that one made the most sense to me. Okay. So what I did this morning is I pulled some, or no, was it last night? It was last night. Everything's, gosh, I can't even remember. Isn't that sad? Can't distinguish between last night and this morning. In part because I was doing kind of the same thing. And so I've been cataloging my decks, just writing them in a notebook. Who wrote it, what the name is, tarot or oracle or playing cards or whatever, and Lenormand, what they are, and going through that. And I ended up, and I've been thinking about this for a while actually, I came upon these again. They were kind of pushed back in a thing, so the Extraordinary Earth cards. And what I had noticed about these when I first got them in the middle of last year was that they seem to be quite good at body issues. And so when I brought them out, I thought, alrighty, I'm going to ask these cards about what I can do to kind of support my body and its healing and what it needs, etc. And I did get some really interesting cards. So I got this. And how is that for a representation of a chakra? Maybe. It's also, to me, and when I looked at this, actually when I looked at this, I just saw the back of the card and I looked at that and I thought, maybe I need to bring the energy up in a spiral, which is the way, this kind of cone shape, I think, is the way the chakras are often represented. So that's, I'm going to try that the next time I sit down and try to bring the energy up or whatever. I'm going to think of bringing it in a spiral as opposed to trying to bring it in a more direct way. So I thought that was cool. This I'm not so sure about, except, it does have a rainbow, and so that is light coming down. It's not white light, but I wonder if I could, usually, we think in terms of white light. Maybe I need to bring down chakra colors from above as opposed to from below, although there is water there, so it reflects, it's there in the reflection as well. The watery aspect of this is a little bit confused because it looks like it's about to storm and rain, and certainly there must be some moisture particles for there to be that rainbow. But it looks like in general it's in a drought situation, this area. The water line has gone way down. To me, again, this is going upward. And look, Eline, I don't think these are aspens, I think they're poplars, but again, they have that white bark, right? They have that white or light colored bark with the strands or layers of the dark. So I take that two ways, both to go ahead and do that upward thing. Actually, it reminds me of something else now that I think about it. Very interesting. So I'll mention that as well. And then, but then also certainly that getting rid of those, that dark, the crud, getting rid of the crud. So when I first, the other thing that it reminds me of is being sequestered in the trees. And so one of the, my first experience where I really sat down and I imagined that rose and kind of extended it to kind of be around me a little bit, and then was releasing the, what is not mine, to let it go, and then to take back in what is mine that has been astray. In the end, kind of was as I was sitting with that whole thing and where my aura would kind of be, etc., I suddenly was reminded of and surrounded by, I stepped right back into this experience as a child when there was shrubbery, and just here and there, it wasn't everywhere, the shrubbery that used to grow kind of in a mound. And as children, I think by the time we were 8, it was a little bit difficult to get into these shrubs. And certainly by the time we were 10, it really wasn't very feasible. But there were little areas in there. I mean, so we would go in these shrubs as kids and play. And we're, very, again, sequestered. There was the feeling of being protected, and you're sitting there, and there's not grass under there, it's ground, it's the earth. So it was just, so that was a pleasant, again, I kind of jumped out of energy work and into almost a more shamanic experience, but it was a real experience that I'd had in the past. This card came up, and I find this a really, really interesting card, because this is, in reality, this is a picture of methane gas coming up through ice someplace in Alaska. Methane bubbles in a lake in Alaska. Isn't that crazy? But anyway, this looks to me like a slow release of gases, a slow release of something, and it being kind of locked into the ice. So it's just really, again, it reminds me of the stuff coming out of my belly, the pimples that are coming out, and maybe the crud being released. That everything's coming out really slowly, and partly because there is this ice here. If this was regular water, hot water, normal temperature water, it would be bubbling and coming up freely, but it's not. And when and so I feel like there's something about me physically that is that barrier, that things aren't transpiring. There isn't the respiration that needs to go on, isn't happening. And yesterday when I was doing, so I can see this is going to be a really long one. Yesterday when I was doing what was I trying to do? I guess I was at that point where I was bringing whatever was out there in here. There's the well, no, it wasn't that. I was wanting to go up to the white light. That's what it was. I was going to go up to the white light, and I thought, well, I usually have a helper for that. And I thought, are the billy goats there? The goats, the mountain goats that are usually on my crown chakra. And no, there weren't billy goats. And I thought, well, the bear has been so prominent. I'll see if the bear, if I can, and again, it's kind of like putting a hand on something and having it help me go to a certain place. And so what happened was really amusing. So almost instantly I'm thinking bear, and here's this big bear, and it's not taking me anywhere. The bear is taking over, is what it's doing. And so this bear, this big paw just reaches up and grabs, and grabs the light and just is bringing it down into my crown chakra. So that was the feeling of it, was this, bear in just one paw and just kind of standing in one paw, just and and yet, for all that crazy bear effort, and I felt like that was not the white light. I felt like that was the bear reaching up into that personal sun area. It was yellow light. It was golden light. I felt like the bear was bringing this stuff into like a void. It's like it's coming in and it's dispersing and it's gone. It's almost like a person who is so starved that no matter how much food you put into them, they're still starved. Yeah, or like bringing it down into a void that neutralizes it immediately, so that there's never any kind of accumulation and it can't just stay there. So it's being brought in and it dissipates, it's gone. So it was a really strange experience, and despite having that powerful bear, doing these aggressive, powerful things, there was essentially no effect. And I think that was educational, and I'm not sure exactly what it means, but I think that was showing me something, and it might have been showing me something like this: something else has to give. Something else has to give, and I haven't figured out what that is yet. That has to give. In order for me to really take in the good stuff, something has to give. And I don't know if it's just that all the crud needs to be released or what, but something has not. And you can't see the ice, and here it's kind of black. You can't see it, so that there's something that still needs to be dealt with. So I don't know, I was curious. This card I wasn't surprised to get, because to me this is a card of steps and it is a card of structure. It's a card of habit, because all of these are all the same. And so that certainly speaks to continue to do it. Continue, 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 continue. Practice, practice, practice. Repeat, 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 repeat endlessly. Repeat. Also, this is, come to think of it, these formations like this, I believe, are from, I'm trying to remember exactly what it is, but I think it's from lava that comes up but doesn't come up on the surface and then cools very, very slowly. So there's something about slowness to this card as well. And my last card, roots. Grounding, grounding, grounding. Roots, roots, roots. That's a card of roots. Of gripping the ground. Okay, now I'm still not to the end, because Eline had a difficult week. And as you were talking about your difficult week, Eline, these cards came to my mind. One card in particular came to my mind because you're talking about how you had said how the Shakti makes you more who you are, or something along those lines. And these are cards from the Psychic Tarot for the Heart, so I'm just going to show these to you. And they're actually all major arcanas. So I'm not sure, that's Tower, so that's the Star. But the first one is Death. But look at that. I've always thought that this is not my favorite deck in the world, but that's a pretty awesome card. That's the Death card, called Release, in Psychic Tarot for the Heart. It's like he can no longer keep the clothes on. They're going to be shed, whether he helps the process or not. And then this, to some extent, you know, again, the idea of the Shakti energy or whatever coming in and blasting things away. And so, you know, if you've had chains on for a while, it's hard to remember how to stand up, right? And then this one for sure, this is the Tower card. Is this not your Tower card or what? With the heart there. In any case, now I think I'm finished. And the storms also seem to be going away. I hear that the thunder is getting farther and farther away. And I should probably check the weather to make sure that I don't have any truly severe weather headed my way in the next few hours. And thank you for the conversation, Eline. So this helps ameliorate the hermit aspect, certainly, actually in a very big way. So tremendous gratitude for that, helping me think through this and helping me not feel like I'm way out there for the things that I'm doing here, and supporting and encouraging me as I do these explorations that I think are really quite fundamental to helping my health, helping it stabilize, and helping to shield myself from further, I don't even want to know what you'd call it, invasions, damage. There's all kinds of words that would apply. But anyway, that's all for now. Take care. Bye-bye.